The train from Nice to Venice took us along the Italian Riviera, hugging the coastline where the Mediterranean sparkled in the morning sun. Mariana sat beside me with her head on my shoulder, our fingers interlaced, and I kept stealing glances at her just to confirm this was real. That she was real, that we were real together. Everything felt different now. The colors seemed brighter, food tasted better. Even the rhythmic sound of the train on the tracks felt like music. I'd heard people talk about falling in love making the world more vivid, but I'd never understood it until now. "What are you thinking about?" Mariana asked without opening her eyes. "How happy I am." She squeezed my hand. "Me too. Ridiculously, impossibly happy." "Is that a bad thing?" "No, just unfamiliar. I keep waiting for something to go wrong." I kissed the top of her head. "Nothing's going to go wrong. We're going to Venice. We're going to eat pasta and ride gondolas and get hopelessly lost in narrow streets. And it's going to be perfect." She smiled. "You can't promise that." "Watch me." Venice announced itself long before we arrived. The train crossing the causeway over the lagoon. The city rising from the water like a dream made solid. Buildings in shades of pink and gold. Church domes catching the sunlight. Boats moving through canals instead of cars on streets. It looked impossible, like someone had built a city just to prove it could be done. We emerged from Santa Lucia station into chaos. Tourists everywhere, water taxi drivers calling out prices, the smell of salt water and fish and coffee. But also beauty. The Grand Canal spread before us, wide and green-blue, lined with palaces that had stood for centuries. "It's exactly like the pictures," Mariana breathed, "but also completely different. The pictures don't capture the feeling of it." We found our hotel after getting lost 3 times, which became a pattern in Venice. The streets, or rather the narrow passages between buildings, followed no logical pattern. They twisted and turned, opened onto small squares or dead-ended at canals, doubled back on themselves. Every few blocks, you'd have to cross a bridge. The only way to navigate was to surrender to being lost and trust you'd eventually find what you were looking for. Our hotel was tiny, tucked into a quiet square away from the main tourist areas. The room was small but charming. Exposed beams, a window looking onto the square, a bed that took up most of the space but was comfortable and covered in white linens that smelled like lavender. "Perfect," Mariana declared, dropping her bag and immediately going to the window. "Look, we can see a church tower, and there's a little cafe below. And oh, Peter, come see this." I joined her at the window and she pointed to the small square below where an elderly couple was dancing. Actually dancing, there on the cobblestones, to music coming from someone's radio. They must have been in their 80s, moving slowly but with obvious joy, completely unselfconscious. "That's going to be us someday," Mariana said softly. "Dancing in Venice? Dancing anywhere. Still in love, still choosing each other, still finding joy in simple moments." I wrapped my arms around her from behind and rested my chin on her shoulder. "That sounds perfect." We spent the rest of that first day just wandering. Venice demands to be wandered. You can't rush it, can't efficiently see everything. You have to let yourself get lost, discover hidden churches and tiny shops and unexpected courtyards. You have to accept that you'll walk in circles and that sometimes the only way forward is to take a water taxi. We found Piazza San Marco as the afternoon light turned golden. The vast square with its Byzantine basilica and elegant arcades, pigeons everywhere, tourists taking photos, street musicians playing. It was crowded and touristy and also undeniably magnificent. "I feel like I've seen this 1,000 times in movies and photos," Mariana said. "But being here, actually standing here, it's different. Everything's different in person," I agreed. The scale, the details, the way the light hits the buildings. We had lunch at a restaurant with terrible reviews on the internet, but which had an old woman at the door calling out to passers-by in enthusiastic broken English. The food was simple but delicious. Spaghetti with clams, grilled fish, a carafe of white wine so cold it hurt my teeth. The old woman, who turned out to own the place, sat with us for a few minutes and told us about her Venice, about growing up on these islands when there were more locals than tourists, when everyone knew everyone. "Now it's different," she said with a philosophical shrug. "But still beautiful, still home. You two are in love, yes?" Mariana and I looked at each other and smiled. Yes, we said together. Good. Venice is for lovers. You will have beautiful memories here. As the afternoon wore on, we made our way back toward our hotel, taking a deliberately indirect route to see more of the city. That's when we passed a small pier with gondolas tied up, waiting for customers. An elderly man sat on a stool nearby, smoking a cigarette, watching the canal. Should we? Mariana asked, looking at the gondolas. They're expensive, I said, and kind of touristy. We're tourists, and we're in Venice. When else will we get to ride in a gondola? She was right. We approached the old man. Gondola ride? He asked in English before we could speak. Very romantic. Best time of day, the sun is setting soon. I take you through the quiet canals, away from the crowds. How much? I asked. He named a price that was indeed expensive but not unreasonable for Venice. We agreed. The old man introduced himself as Marco and helped us into his gondola with surprising strength for someone who must have been in his 70s. The boat was long and black, with a small cushioned bench facing backward. Mariana and I settled in close together, and Marco pushed us away from the pier with his long oar. Venice from the water is a completely different city. You see the buildings from angles impossible on foot, the way they rise directly from the canals with no embankment, the water-stained stones at the base, the ornate windows and balconies above. You pass under bridges where people wave down at you. You drift past other boats, water taxis, delivery boats, other gondolas. Marco was a skilled gondolier, steering us through the network of canals with practiced ease, keeping up a running commentary in accented but good English about the buildings we passed, the history of different neighborhoods, where the good restaurants were that locals actually ate at. As we moved into narrower, quieter canals away from the main tourist areas, the magic of Venice became even more apparent. Here, laundry hung between buildings. Cats watched us from windowsills. The sound of voices and cooking drifted from open windows. This was Venice as a real city, not just a museum. The sun was getting lower, painting everything in warm light. Mariana leaned against me, her head on my shoulder, completely relaxed. "This is perfect," she murmured. "Absolutely perfect." Marco was steering us under a low bridge when Mariana suddenly sat up. "Peter, what's that?" She was pointing to the bottom of the gondola, where something was tucked under the small seat. Something wrapped in dark, water-stained cloth. "Marco, there's something here," I said. He glanced back, frowning. "What thing?" I reached down and carefully picked up the bundle. It was heavier than I expected. I unwrapped the cloth carefully and felt my heart skip. It was a violin case. Old, the leather cracked and worn, the brass fittings green with age. But obviously once beautiful, once expensive. "I have never seen this," Marco said, genuinely puzzled. He'd stopped rowing and turned to look. "This is not mine. Maybe from previous customer. It looks really old," Mariana said. I opened the case carefully, not knowing what to expect. Inside was a violin, and even I, who knew nothing about instruments, could tell it was special. The wood glowed with a warm amber color. The craftsmanship was exquisite, and despite obvious age, it looked like it had been carefully maintained. Tucked into the case beside the violin was an envelope, yellowed with age. "There's a letter," Mariana said, picking it up with gentle fingers. The envelope was addressed simply, "Per Giuliana," for Giuliana. The paper was thin and brittle with age. Mariana carefully opened it and pulled out a single sheet covered in neat handwriting. She read silently for a moment, her eyes widening. "What does it say?" I asked. "It's dated October 15th, 1950, she said softly. "It's in Italian. Let me translate." She cleared her throat and began to read. "My dearest Giuliana, if you are reading this, you have found my violin as I hoped you would. By now you know that I have gone to America, to New York, to take the position with the orchestra there. Please know that this decision breaks my heart, but the opportunity is too great to refuse. This violin is my promise to you. I will return in 1 year, no more. When I come back, we will marry as we planned, and I will never leave you again. Keep my violin safe. It is the most precious thing I own, other than you." When you hold it, know that I am holding you in my thoughts. I will write to you every week. Wait for me, my love. I will return. Forever yours, Alessandro. The gondola had drifted to a stop. Marco was standing completely still, his face pale. Alessandro, he repeated. Did you say Alessandro? Yes, Mariana said. The letter is signed Alessandro. Do you? Alessandro Marchetti, Marco said, his voice strange. That was my grandfather's name. He disappeared in 1950. My father was only 5 years old. They never knew what happened to him. He just vanished. My grandmother died never knowing if he abandoned her or if something terrible happened. The three of us stared at each other, the weight of this discovery settling over us. Your grandmother, I said slowly. Was her name Giuliana? Marco nodded, tears forming in his eyes. Giuliana Rossini. She married my grandfather in 1948. They had my father in 1945. And then in October 1950, Alessandro left. Said he was going to buy fish for dinner. Never came back. He reached out with a shaking hand. May I see the letter? Mariana handed it to him carefully. He read it, tears now flowing freely down his weathered face. He did not abandon us, Marco whispered. All these years we thought he left, that he did not want to be a father, did not want the responsibility. My father grew up believing his father had abandoned him. My grandmother died believing she had not been enough to make him stay. But he did not leave us. He left for us, for opportunity, and he was planning to return. What happened to him? Mariana asked gently. If he was planning to return in a year. I do not know, Marco said. We never knew. There were no letters, no messages. It was as if he disappeared from the earth. An idea was forming in my mind. Marco, if you want, I could help you look into it. I used to be pretty good at finding information about people. We could try to discover what happened to Alessandro. Marco looked at me with such hope in his eyes that I felt the weight of the responsibility. You would do this? For a stranger? You're not a stranger anymore, I said. And besides, Mariana and I have a few days in Venice. We'd like to help if we can. Marco carefully returned the letter to the envelope and clutched it to his chest. Then he picked up his oar with renewed purpose. First, I take you to meet someone. My mother. She is 90 years old, the daughter of Alessandro and Giuliana. She grew up without a father. She should see this. She should know. He rowed us with surprising speed to a different part of Venice, tying up at a private dock behind a modest but well-maintained house. We followed him inside, where the smell of something cooking filled the air, soup, maybe, and fresh bread. Mama, Marco called out. Mama, come please, I have something important. An elderly woman appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. She was tiny, bent with age, but her eyes were sharp and clear. When she saw Marco's face, she immediately knew something significant had happened. Che cosa? She asked. What is it? Marco spoke to her in rapid Italian, too fast for me to follow even if I'd understood the language. But I watched her face as he spoke, saw the emotions play across it. Confusion, then shock, then something like pain mixed with relief. Marco handed her the letter. She sat down heavily in a chair and read it, her lips moving silently. When she finished, she pressed the letter to her chest and closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face. Mariana and I stood awkwardly, not knowing what to do, but Marco gestured for us to sit. The old woman, Rosa, we learned her name was, finally opened her eyes and looked at us. In English, Marco said to her. They do not speak Italian well. Rosa nodded and took a breath. Her English was heavily accented but clear. All my life, she said, I believed my father did not want me. I believed he left because I was not enough. My mother, she told me no, told me he loved us, but I thought she was lying to protect me. And when she died still not knowing what happened to him, still believing he would come back someday. She looked down at the letter again. But here it is, proof that he loved us, that he left not to abandon us, but to make a better life for us. He was going to return. Do you have any idea what might have happened? I asked gently. Why he never came back? Rosa shook her head. Nothing. We sent letters to the address we had in New York, but they came back undeliverable. We contacted authorities, but they found nothing. It was as if he vanished. May I look into it? I offered. I have some resources, some skills at finding information. With your permission, I'd like to try to find out what happened to Alessandro. Rosa looked at me for a long moment, then at Mariana, then at her son. Yes, she said finally. Please, even if the answer is painful, I would like to know. After 70 years, I would like to know why my father never came home. Marco insisted on making us dinner. It was the least he could do, he said, after we'd found the violin and agreed to help. We ate Rosa's soup and fresh bread, and listened as she told us stories about her mother Giuliana, about growing up in Venice after the war, about the shadow her father's disappearance had cast over her entire life. Later, back at our hotel, Mariana and I lay in bed unable to sleep, both thinking about Alessandro and the letter and the violin that had somehow survived 70 years. How does a violin stay in a gondola for 70 years? Mariana wondered. I don't think it did, I said. I think maybe Alessandro hid it somewhere before he left, somewhere he thought Giuliana would find it. Maybe in a gondola that belonged to a friend, and somehow it stayed there or got moved around, passed down through different owners until it ended up in Marco's gondola today. The timing is impossible, but here we are. Do you really think you can find out what happened to him? I can try. Tomorrow, I'll start with the basics, immigration records, newspaper archives, anything I can access online. If Alessandro really went to New York in 1950, there should be some trace of him. Mariana curled against me. You're a good man, Peter Matthews, spending your vacation researching a 70-year-old disappearance for people you just met. I'm not doing it alone. You're helping too. Of course I am. We're a team now. I kissed her forehead. Yes, we are. The next 2 days were spent largely in our hotel room with my laptop, searching through databases and archives. I kept my subscription to some of the information resources I'd used in Chicago. You never know when they might be useful, I'd thought. Now I was glad I had. Mariana helped by translating Italian documents and making calls to various archives in New York and Venice. Her Italian was much better than she'd let on. She'd spent 3 months in Rome earlier in her travels, apparently. On the second day, we found him. Alessandro Marchetti, age 32, violinist. Immigrated to New York in October 1950. Worked with the New York Symphony Orchestra. And then, in February 1952, a brief mention in a newspaper, musician killed in accident. The article was short. Alessandro had been traveling from New York to Boston to visit a music shop that sold rare violins. His car had skidded on ice and crashed. He died instantly. The article mentioned that he was survived by a wife and daughter in Italy, and that attempts to contact them had been unsuccessful due to incorrect address information. He'd been coming back. Maybe not that exact moment, but he'd been accumulating money, establishing his career, preparing to return to his family as he'd promised. And he died less than 2 years after leaving, probably thinking he still had time, that his family would understand the delay. I sat back from the laptop, feeling hollowed out by the tragedy of it. He was going to keep his promise, Mariana said quietly, reading over my shoulder. He never abandoned them. He just ran out of time. We printed the articles and documents we'd found and brought them to Rosa and Marco the next day. This time, Marco's wife was there too, and several other family members. Alessandro's grandchildren and great-grandchildren, people who'd grown up in the shadow of his disappearance. Rosa read through everything carefully, her aged hands trembling slightly. When she finished, she looked up at us with tears in her eyes, but she was smiling. "Thank you," she said. "Thank you for giving me this, for giving us all this. Now we know. Now we can grieve properly, but also celebrate him. He did not abandon us. He was trying to build something better for us. And he died trying to come home." She stood up with Marco's help and went to a cabinet, pulling out an old photo album. She showed us pictures of Alessandro, a handsome man with dark hair and eyes, holding a violin, smiling at the camera. In one photo, he was with Giuliana, both of them young and in love, her head on his shoulder. "My mother never married again," Rosa said. "Many men tried, but she said no. She said she was already married, that Alessandro would return. Everyone thought she was foolish, holding on to a man who had left her. But she was not foolish. She was faithful. And she was right. He would have returned if he could." She closed the album carefully. "She died when I was 45. Lung cancer. In her last days, she talked about Alessandro constantly. Asked if he had come. Said she needed to wait just a little longer. I thought it was the medicine making her confused. But now I understand. She knew. Somehow, she knew he had not abandoned her. She knew he was trying to come back. There wasn't a dry eye in the room by then, including mine and Mariana's. Before we left, Rosa gave us each a long hug. "You have given an old woman peace," she told me. "And you have given my family closure we did not know we needed. I pray you stay together always. You and your beautiful girl. I pray you have many years together. Because love like this," she gestured to the photos of Alessandro and Giuliana, "it is rare and precious and worth everything." That evening, Mariana and I walked through Venice as the sun set, neither of us talking much. The story of Alessandro and Giuliana had affected us both deeply. The tragedy of it, yes, but also the beauty, the faithfulness, the love that lasted beyond death. We found ourselves on the Rialto Bridge, looking out over the Grand Canal as the light turned golden and the water sparkled. "Peter," Mariana said quietly, "promise me something. Anything. Promise me that if something happens, if we get separated, if life takes us in different directions, if one of us has to leave for some reason, we'll find our way back to each other. Promise me you won't just disappear." I turned to face her, taking both her hands. "Mariana, I promise you that wherever I go, whatever happens, you'll always know where to find me. I'm not Alessandro. I'm not going to leave and hope you understand. If I ever have to go somewhere without you, I'll make sure you know exactly where I am and when I'm coming back. And I'll always come back." She stood on her toes and kissed me. "And I promise you the same. I'm not going anywhere without you. We're in this together now." "Together," I agreed. That night, lying in bed with Mariana asleep in my arms, I thought about Alessandro's letter. "This violin is my promise to you. I will return." And he'd meant it. He'd fully intended to keep that promise. But life had other plans. It made me realize how fragile everything is, how quickly circumstances can change, how important it is to not take anything for granted. I had Mariana now, here in my arms. I had this moment, and I couldn't assume we'd have forever. I had to love her now, fully, without holding back. I had to tell her every day how much she meant to me. I had to make sure that if something happened, God forbid, she would never doubt that I loved her, that I wanted to be with her, that she was the most important thing in my life. Before we left Venice, we made one more visit to Marco. I wanted to return the violin properly, to make sure it ended up where it belonged. Marco was waiting for us at his gondola pier, and with him was Rosa, supported by her son but standing on her own. "I wanted to see where it was found," she explained. "The gondola where my father's violin spent all these years." We showed her the exact spot where Mariana had noticed the wrapped bundle. Rosa touched the bottom of the gondola gently, reverently, as if it were sacred ground. "Thank you, Papa," she whispered, "for leaving me this message, for letting me know you loved us, for keeping your promise in the only way you could." She turned to Marco. "This violin should be played again. It is too beautiful to sit silent. Perhaps one of your grandchildren would like to learn." Marco nodded. "My grandson, actually. He has asked many times to learn. I will give it to him and tell him the story of his great-great-grandfather." As we prepared to leave, Rosa stopped us one more time. "You two remind me of the photos I have seen of my mother and father," she said. "The way you look at each other, the way you stand close together. You have found something rare. Do not let it go." "We won't," Mariana promised. "Good. Because love like this, it is worth everything. It is worth waiting for, worth fighting for, worth crossing oceans for. My father knew this. My mother knew this. And now you know it too. On our last night in Venice, Mariana and I returned to Piazza San Marco. The square was beautifully lit at night, the basilica glowing golden, orchestras playing at the outdoor cafes. We sat at one of the tables and ordered wine and tiramisu, content just to watch the world go by. "What are you thinking about?" Mariana asked. "About Alessandro and Giuliana. About Rosa waiting 70 years for answers. About how lucky we are." She reached across the table and took my hand. "We are lucky, but it's not just luck, is it? We chose this. We chose to take the risks, to be honest with each other, to be brave enough to fall in love even though it's scary. You're right, and I choose you, Mariana. Every day, I choose you. And I choose you." We raised our glasses in a toast. To Alessandro and Giuliana, to love that transcends time and death, to promises kept even when life intervenes, to the courage to love fully even knowing how fragile everything is. Venice had given us more than beautiful views and romantic gondola rides. It had given us perspective. It had shown us what real love looks like. Faithful, enduring, willing to wait, willing to hope even in the face of impossible odds. As we walked back to our hotel that night, through the maze of narrow streets and over countless bridges, I felt grateful for every moment. Grateful for Mariana beside me, for her hand in mine, for the sound of her laughter echoing off ancient walls, for the way she stopped to look at every cat we passed and every window box full of flowers. This was what mattered. Not the grand gestures or perfect moments, but the simple act of being together, of choosing each other, of building a story one moment at a time. Alessandro's violin had survived 70 years to tell its story. Our story was just beginning, but I knew it would be a good one, because it was ours, and because every day we were choosing to write it together.